At 9:47 on a Wednesday morning, my debit card was declined 3 times while I stood in line trying to pay for my blood pressure medicine. I called my son. He calmly said, "I froze your card. You've been too forgetful to handle money." Then my daughter-in-law took the phone. "From now on, tell us what you need. We'll decide what you can buy." I didn't argue. I drove straight to the bank. 40 minutes later, I logged into my account and realized nobody had stolen a single dollar. They had stolen something far more valuable. I need you to stay with me through this one. Before we continue, leave me a comment below. Tell me what you're up to right now, cooking, driving, working, or just taking a moment. I genuinely appreciate you being here. Quick note, some details are fictionalized to strengthen the lesson. What matters most is the message at its core. At exactly 9:47, on a Wednesday morning in August, I stood at the Granville family pharmacy counter, watching my pension debit card get declined for the 3rd time. While a line of strangers wondered if I'd finally become the confused old man they expected me to be. Claire Morgan had worked that counter for 12 years, long enough to recognize the difference between a card that was broken and a card that had been turned off by someone else. She ran it again anyway, her face carefully neutral in that way. Retail workers perfect when they're embarrassed for you. I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly. "It says your card was declined. Should I try it again?" "That's strange," I said. "Yes, please try once more." The machine beeped, sharp, final, humiliating. Behind me, someone sighed loud enough for everyone to hear. Some of us have jobs to get to. I'd spent 40 years designing bridges strong enough to bear weight most people never thought about. I understood one principle above all others: never repair a crack before understanding why it formed. So I didn't argue. I didn't ask Claire to call the bank. I pulled out my wallet and counted the last cash. I had 2 20s and a 10 I'd kept for emergencies since Ruth passed. $50 for blood pressure medication that cost $47.82. Claire handed me my change and the white paper bag without meeting my eyes. "Have a good Wednesday, sir." "Thank you," I said. The August heat hit me the moment I stepped outside. Ohio summer, the kind that makes the air thick and heavy, like wet wool. I walked to my car, a 2018 Honda Accord I'd bought used 3 years ago, paid cash, no financing, and sat in the driver's seat with the engine running and the air conditioning struggling to catch up. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I was 70 years old, and I'd just been publicly humiliated over $47, and my hands were completely steady on the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and called my son. Preston answered on the second ring, and his voice had that rehearsed calm I'd heard too many times in business meetings where the numbers didn't add up. 41 years old, my only child, and he sounded like he was reading from a script. "Hey, Dad, everything okay? My card was declined at the pharmacy just now," I said. "I'm trying to understand what happened." A pause. Half a second too long. "I froze the card, Dad. You've been forgetful lately. We were worried." The air conditioning finally caught blowing cold air across my face. I didn't say anything. I waited. "See, it's for your own good," Preston continued. "You called me 3 times last week asking the same question about Margot's school schedule. You forgot you'd already asked." I hadn't called 3 times. I'd called once. But I didn't correct him. Not yet. Then Simone's voice cut through the background, sharp, efficient, utterly certain she was right. She'd worked in corporate IT for 15 years before leaving to help Preston's failing construction business, and she brought that same systematic certainty to everything she touched. "Let me talk to him." I heard the phone change hands. "Charnon Didenkunna," Simone said, and there was no dad, no warmth. Just my first name delivered like a bullet point on a presentation slide. "From now on, if you want to buy anything, send us the prescription first. We'll approve it if it makes sense." We're trying to protect you." It wasn't the $47.82. It was the look in their eyes back in the pharmacy the moment every American over a certain age knows too well when strangers start wondering if you've finally lost it. And now my own son was giving me that same look over the phone, and I could hear it in his voice. When did my son start speaking to me like I was a patient needing supervision instead of the man who taught him to read? But I'm a civil engineer. I don't build structures that collapse under the first stress test. I build things that last. "I understand," I said. "Thank you, son. We'll get you set up on a better system," Preston said, back on the line now. "Something simpler, maybe one of those apps where we can see your purchases in real time." Simone found a great one that sounds fine," I said. "I appreciate you both looking out for me." Another pause. This one felt different, uncertain. "Okay, Dad, we'll talk soon." "Drive safe," I said and hung up. I sat in the parking lot for another 2 minutes watching the pharmacy entrance. A woman in her 30s walked out carrying a white bag just like mine. She got into her car, checked her phone, drove away. Normal Wednesday morning. Normal transaction. Nobody had declined her card 3 times while strangers judged her competence. The August sun blazed through the windshield hot enough to burn my forearms where they rested on the steering wheel. My phone showed 10:03. 16 minutes since I'd tried to buy my medication with my own money from my own pension account. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or demand explanations. I'd said, "Thank you, son," and hung up like a good father who trusted his children to make wise decisions. But I didn't drive home. I started the engine, put the car in reverse, and drove straight to First Trust Bank, where I'd kept my money for 15 years. Because before you repair a crack, you need to understand why it formed. And before you trust someone's explanation, you need to verify the math. First Trust Bank sat 3 blocks from the pharmacy brick and glass, with parking spaces I'd used twice a month for 15 years. I pulled into the same spot I always did, 3rd row near the oak tree, and walked through doors I could navigate with my eyes closed. Tanya Harrington had managed the Granville branch of First Trust Bank for 15 years, long enough to recognize the look of a man whose financial identity had been stolen not by strangers, but by the people he'd trusted most. She looked up from her desk the moment I walked through the door, and something in my face made her stand immediately. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "come to my office." Her office had glass walls and a door that closed. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, fake leather worn at the armrests from thousands of conversations about mortgages and overdrafts and retirement accounts. I sat. She sat. She pulled up my account on her computer screen and typed something. Paused. Typed again. Her expression shifted from professional courtesy to something closer to concern. "Mr. Caldwell," she said carefully, "the mailing address on your account, did you change it recently?" "Oh, no," I said. "I've lived in the same house for 36 years. She turned the monitor toward me. "This is your son's address, and your phone number was changed to his number. Your email to—" She squinted at the screen. "Someone else's email. All yesterday afternoon." I looked at the screen. Preston's address in Columbus, 40 minutes away. Preston's cell phone number. Simone's Gmail account, the one she used for her freelance IT consulting. "I didn't authorize any of those changes," I said. Tanya typed something else. Clicked. Scrolled. "There's more. A replacement debit card was requested yesterday at 4:17 p.m. Rush delivery. It was mailed this morning to—" She stopped. "To Preston's address," I finished. "Yes." I sat back in the fake leather chair and felt something click into place in my mind, the way a bridge cable locks into position under exactly the right tension. This wasn't panic. This wasn't forgetfulness or concern for my well-being. This was systematic. "How did they do it?" I asked. Online access, Tanya said quietly. Someone logged into your account using your username and password. Changed everything in about 12 minutes. The system flagged it for review, but... She stopped again. But what? But the phone number on file was already changed to your son's number by the time our fraud system called to verify. So he answered. Confirmed the changes. Said you'd asked him to help you with technology because you were having trouble. 15 years. I'd banked here for 15 years. Signed my name on the same signature card. Shaken hands with the same manager every year when my pension account renewed. And yesterday, someone decided I no longer deserved that courtesy. I said, and my voice was steady in a way I didn't feel. How much money is in my account? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned the screen back toward herself and pulled up the balance. Your pension deposit from this month posted on the 1st. That's $3,847. Your savings account has $127,434. Total liquid assets, $131,200. Every penny, every single penny I'd earned over 40 years of designing bridges and living carefully and putting Ruth through cancer treatment and raising Preston and saving for the retirement I'd planned so carefully. All of it sitting exactly where I'd left it. They didn't take anything, I said. Tanya's face went very still. No, Mr. Caldwell, they didn't. And that's when the real horror settled in. Because if Preston had needed money, if this was desperation or greed or even addiction, I could understand it. I could fight it. I could call the police and file a report and watch someone get arrested for theft. But they hadn't stolen my money. They'd stolen my ability to use my own money. They'd frozen my card and changed my contact information and had a new card sent to Preston's house, so that from this moment forward, every time I tried to buy medication or groceries or gas, I'd have to ask permission from my 41-year-old son and his wife, who thought I was too forgetful to manage my own prescriptions. What do you call it? When someone doesn't rob you, they just make sure you can't reach your own wallet. I need to open a fraud investigation, Tanya said. She picked up her internal phone line and pressed 3 buttons. This is Tanya Harrington in branch 47. I need to open a fraud investigation file. Can you come down to my office? She hung up, looked at me. Mr. Caldwell, I've worked in banking for 22 years. I've seen account takeovers. I've seen elder financial abuse. This is... She chose her words carefully. This is very methodical. Yes, I said. And your son has power of attorney? No, I said. He does not. Something changed in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Then every change made to this account yesterday was unauthorized, she said quietly. Which means we can reverse them. But Mr. Caldwell, she paused, set her hands flat on the desk, the way engineers do when they're about to deliver bad news about load-bearing calculations. If they did all this yesterday in 12 minutes, and they were confident enough to answer our fraud verification call, and they had your login credentials. She stopped, started again. I think we need to look at how long this has been going on. I looked through the glass window at the parking lot outside. My Honda sat in the 3rd row near the oak tree exactly where I'd parked it. The August sun was still as bright as ever. But starting this Wednesday, everything had changed. Thursday morning I returned to the bank. Tanya had the conference room ready, the one with frosted glass walls and a table long enough for loan closings. She'd spent the previous afternoon pulling records. The timeline she laid across that table didn't measure days or weeks. It measured 8 months of decisions I never made, written in my son's handwriting, on forms I never saw. December 15th, 2022. Tanya said, sliding the first printed page toward me. Online banking's credentials reset. Do you remember doing that? I stared at the timestamp. 3:42 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Preston helped me set up online banking around then. I said slowly. My computer was having issues. He said he'd update my security settings while he was fixing it. I thought it was just routine maintenance. January 9th. Tanya continued laying down another page. Preston Caldwell added as secondary contact on the account. Authorized to receive balance information and transaction alerts. He said it was in case something happened to me. I said. Emergency contact information. I thought that was smart planning. January 23rd. Simone Caldwell added as additional secondary contact. I didn't remember that conversation at all, but the form had a digital signature, my digital signature, and a timestamp that said 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. January 7th. Tanya said quietly. All transaction alerts rerouted from your cell phone to Preston's phone number. You stopped receiving notifications about withdrawals, deposits, or balance changes. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I wondered why I stopped getting those text messages. I thought the bank had discontinued the service. We didn't. She laid down 3 more pages. March, April, May. Each one another small change. My daily withdrawal limit lowered. My overdraft protection removed. My automatic bill pay authorizations shifted to require manual approval. 8 months. December to August. Each change alone looked harmless, helpful even. A son making sure his aging father's finances were protected. But laid out together on that conference table, they formed something else entirely. A wall, brick by brick, built around my own money, while I smiled and thanked them for their help. Steen. April 9th, Tanya said, and her voice had gone very quiet. Your daily spending limit was lowered to $500. You managed million-dollar construction projects for 40 years, Mr. Caldwell. Did anyone tell you about this limit? $500. I'd spent 40 years managing projects worth millions, signing off on steel contracts and foundation work that held up entire buildings. I'd calculated load tolerances and stress factors and reviewed budgets that could feed a small town. And someone decided I needed permission to spend more than $500 of my own dollars. No, I said. Nobody told me. Tanya pulled out one more document. This one wasn't a printout. It was a physical form sealed in a plastic evidence sleeve, the way the fraud department preserved original documents. This authorization form has your signature, she said, sliding it toward me. It grants another individual administrative access to your account. Full control. It was submitted to the bank on March 17th. Do you remember signing this? I looked at the signature. It was mine. Perfect loops on the V, the slight leftward slant I'd developed after Ruth died, and my arthritis started in my right hand. My name in my handwriting on a form I'd never seen before in my life. I never signed that, I said. Tanya nodded slowly. That's what I thought. But it's a very good forgery. Not scanned, not photocopied. This is ink on paper, Mr. Caldwell. Someone traced your signature with a pen, March 17th. I stared at the date, and then I remembered. Margot's birthday. March 15th, just 2 days before this form was dated. Preston and Simone had brought her to my house for dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, her favorite, the recipe Ruth used to make. After cake, I'd signed a birthday card for her. A big card with a unicorn on the front, the kind 11-year-old girls like. I'd written Love Grandpa and signed my full name the way I always did on important things. Simone had taken the card from my hand. Said she wanted to add a sticker before they gave it to Margot, brought it into the kitchen. She'd been gone for maybe 3 minutes. How many ordinary moments had they turned into weapons without me noticing? March, I said, and my voice sounded strange even to myself. Margot's birthday. I signed a card. Simone took it to, I stopped. She said she wanted to add a sticker. Tanya's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. 22 years in banking. She'd seen this before. Signature transfer, she said quietly. Probably used tracing paper or a lightbox. Sign your name on a birthday card, in pen place, the authorization form underneath, trace over the indentation. It's low-tech, but it works. Especially if the person doing it has access to multiple samples of your signature to practice with. I thought about my checkbook, my medical forms, my insurance paperwork. All the documents Preston and Simone had offered to help me organize over the past year, taking them home to scan them for my records, bringing them back days later in neat labeled folders. How many times had I signed my own name and handed them the pen? The birthday card, I said. I remember smiling when I signed it. I was thinking about Margot opening it about how she'd turned 11 and was starting to think she was too old for unicorns, but still secretly loved them. I looked down at the form in the evidence sleeve. Simone stood right beside me, and I hadn't suspected a thing. Tanya closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Caldwell," she said carefully, "do you know how they got your online banking password in the first place? The one that was reset in December." I looked at her, then at the stack of documents, then at my hands still steady despite everything. "No," I said, "I don't." The answer to Tanya's question sat in a single line of code buried in my account settings, and she found it in less than 30 seconds. February 9th. Tanya said, scrolling through the security logs on her screen. "Your OTP phone number was changed. One-time password verification. Every transaction over $500 requires a 6-digit code sent via text message." I stared at the date. February, 6 months ago. I haven't gotten a single bank alert in... I stopped trying to remember. "I can't remember the last time." "You wouldn't," Tanya said quietly. "They've all been going to your son's phone for 6 months. The digital system Preston had built around my money wasn't just a wall. It was a permission slip I had to ask my own son to sign every time I wanted to spend more than $500 of my own pension. So every time I tried to make a purchase over that limit, Preston's phone got the verification code," Tanya finished. "Not yours, which means you physically could not complete the transaction without him receiving the alert and either approving it or ignoring it." I thought about the past 6 months. How many times had I tried to pay for something and the transaction had simply failed? The new water heater in May, I'd assumed my card wasn't working and written a check instead. The dental work in June that the office said was declined, so I'd paid cash. The online order for Ruth's memorial garden stones that never went through. I hadn't been forgetful. I hadn't been incompetent. I'd been locked out of my own financial life, one $500 limit at a time, and I'd blamed myself for not understanding technology well enough to make it work. "How did they change the phone number?" I asked. "Through online banking," Tanya said. "With your login credentials, the ones Preston reset in December when he was fixing your computer. Every transaction over $500. Every single one." And Preston's phone had received the alert, the verification code, the power to say yes or no to my own money. For 6 months. "Mr. Caldwell," Tanya said, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to say something difficult. "I need to ask if you want to file a police report. This is fraud. It's identity theft. And given the systematic nature of what they've done..." "Not yet," I said. She blinked. "Not yet. I need to understand the full scope first," I said. "If I call the police now, Preston will know I know. And if he knows I know, I won't be able to see what else he's done." Tanya studied my face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right. But Mr. Caldwell, don't wait too long. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to prove. I won't, I said. I drove home through downtown Granville past the coffee shop, where Ruth and I used to get breakfast on Saturdays past the library, where Preston had checked out books on engineering when he was 12, and still thought he wanted to be like his father. Friday evening. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Dishes in the sink, newspaper on the kitchen table, Ruth's reading glasses still on the arm of her favorite chair, even though she'd been gone for 2 years. Ruth died 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. Some mornings I still reached across the bed before remembering she wasn't there. But tonight, sitting in the living room with the television muted and the August heat pressing against the windows, I needed her clarity more than her comfort. Her photograph sat on the shelf above the television. Summer of 2019, before she got sick. Paint on her nose from when we'd repainted the kitchen together, soft yellow, the color she'd picked, because it reminded her of morning light. She was laughing at something I'd said, and I couldn't remember now what it was, only that she'd been happy. You always said I moved too fast to fix things, I said to the photograph. You'd tell me to understand first. She used to say it when I'd come home frustrated from work, ready to fire a contractor or redesign a bridge support before I'd fully analyzed the problem. When something doesn't make sense, don't rush to fix it. Understand it first. I sat there in the silence and realized something that felt colder than anger. I wasn't angry. Anger has heat, it burns and consumes and demands immediate action. What I felt was something else entirely, something analytical, something patient. 40 years as an engineer taught me one principle above all others: never start repairing a bridge before you understand why the crack formed. Preston had built cracks into my life for 8 months. I needed to understand why before I tore anything down. And I had one advantage Preston didn't know about. He thought I didn't know. That was the only leverage I had left, and I wasn't going to waste it on a phone call full of accusations and excuses. I was going to document everything, understand everything, build a case the way I'd built bridges, with precision and evidence and calculations that couldn't be argued with. I walked to the desk in the corner. Ruth's desk, really, where she'd paid bills and written letters and kept the household running for 36 years. I pulled open the bottom drawer and found what I was looking for: an old engineering notebook, the kind I'd used for 40 years to document problems before I solved them. Graph paper pages, black cover, spine reinforced with cloth tape. I'd filled dozens of these over the years, each one a record of a project from conception to completion. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. Opened it to the first blank page. Picked up a pen, a black ballpoint, the kind that doesn't smear, and wrote the date at the top of the first page. Friday, August 14th, 2023. Then I wrote 3 more lines. Wednesday, August 13th, 2023, 9:47 a.m. Granville Family Pharmacy. Card declined 3 times. This was where it all began. Or at least where I began to realize. What I didn't know yet was that Preston had already made his next move, and I wouldn't discover it until a neighbor asked me a question I didn't know how to answer. Sunday afternoon, 4 days after the pharmacy, my phone rang while I sat in the backyard watching the August sun filter through the maple trees Ruth had planted 30 years ago. Preston's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Not too eager, not suspicious. Hello. Hey, Dad. His voice was casual in a way it hadn't been in months, almost cheerful. How are you doing? I was thinking of dropping by this week. The hardest performance of my 70 years wasn't pretending I didn't know what my son had done. It was pretending I still trusted him while listening to the relief in his voice when he thought I'd surrendered without a fight. I'm fine, son, I said, and I made myself sound tired but content. An old man enjoying a quiet Sunday. Just sitting in the backyard. How's Margot? Did her team win yesterday? A pause. Brief. like he hadn't expected me to ask about normal things. They tied 2-2. She scored one of the goals. That's wonderful, I said, and meant it despite everything else. Tell her I'm proud of her. I will. Another pause. Dad, about this week, are you managing okay with the groceries and everything? With the groceries. With the medication I could no longer buy without his permission. With the life he'd taken control of while I smiled and thanked him. I'm managing fine, I said. Tanya at the bank helped me sort out that card issue. Just a technical problem. I could hear him processing that, deciding whether to press or let it go. Good, he said finally. That's good. But Dad, Simone and I have been talking. We've taken care of everything. You don't need to worry about finances anymore. We'll make sure all your bills get paid, all your medications ordered. You just need to let us know what you need and we'll handle it. He thinks I don't know. The thought arrived with absolute clarity. Preston genuinely believed I'd accepted this, that I'd shrugged and moved on like an old man too confused or too tired to question why his own card stopped working. The relief in his voice wasn't manufactured, it was real. He thought he'd won. I know, son, I said softly. Thank you. I appreciate you both looking out for me. Of course, Dad. That's what family does. I closed my eyes and thought about the engineering notebook sitting on my desk inside, already filling with dates and times and evidence, about Tanya Harrington and the fraud investigation she was quietly assembling, about the 8 months of systematic control Preston had built while I'd trusted him completely. How's the construction business? I asked, because that's what a father who suspected nothing would ask. Another pause, longer this time. Now we're managing. Few tough months, but we'll get through it. Few tough months. I filed that phrase away in my memory to write down later. I'm sure you will, I said. You're a hard worker. Always have been. Thanks, Dad. His voice softened. I'll try to stop by Tuesday or Wednesday, okay? Maybe bring Margot. She's been asking about you. I'd like that, I said. And despite everything, that part was true. We said goodbye. The call ended. I sat there in the backyard holding my phone, watching the sunlight shift through the maple leaves the way it had for 3 decades. I'd taught Preston to ride a bicycle on this same patch of grass 33 years ago, running behind him with my hand on the seat until I finally let go and watched him pedal away on his own. I never imagined the day I'd have to pretend with him, measuring every word like a stranger. But that's what this had become, a performance. And the only way it worked was if Preston never suspected I was acting. I went inside and picked up the engineering notebook from my desk, flipped to the first page where I'd written the pharmacy incident on Friday night. Below it I added, Sunday, August 17th, 2023, 4:32 p.m., Preston called. Then I wrote everything I could remember. The exact words he'd used. The pauses. The relief in his voice when I'd thanked him. The phrase, few tough months about his business. The fact that he wanted to visit Tuesday or Wednesday. I wrote voice notably relieved. He believes I've accepted the situation without question. He thinks I'm too confused or too trusting to investigate. Then I wrote, this is my only advantage, because that's what it was. Preston thought he'd won. He thought the hard part was over, that freezing my card and taking control of my accounts had worked exactly as planned. And now all he had to do was maintain the fiction that he was helping me. Engineers learn early that the most dangerous cracks are the ones hidden beneath the surface, invisible, until you know exactly where to look. Preston thought I couldn't see. That was the crack in his foundation. As long as he believed I was ignorant, he'd stop being careful. He'd make mistakes. He'd reveal things he wouldn't reveal if he knew I was watching. I needed to keep him believing that, no matter how much it cost me to pretend. I added one more line to the notebook. Strategy: maintain appearance of acceptance. Do not confront. Document everything. Let him think he's succeeded. The first page was almost full now. Dates, times, observations, Preston's exact words. It looked like the project logs I'd kept for 40 years, careful documentation of every measurement, every decision, every factor that might matter when the final calculations came due. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was building a case the way I'd once built bridges, one careful measurement at a time, until the structure could bear the weight of truth. I wrote one final line at the bottom of the page, underlined it twice. He thinks I don't know. I closed the notebook and looked at those 5 words for a long time. Then I flipped to page 2. Monday morning, I filled page 2 with more observations. Preston's relief on the phone. The phrase, few tough months, about his construction business. The way he'd assumed I'd accepted everything without question. Then I went outside to water the front garden. Gerald Fletcher had lived 3 houses down for 12 years. The kind of neighbor who waved from his driveway and knew everyone's business without being intrusive. He was watering his own lawn when I turned on the hose, and he walked over with that casual friendliness that meant he wanted to chat. "Morning, Vernon," he said. "So when are you moving? Preston mentioned you'd probably be closer to them by winter." The water from my hose hit the rose bushes. Ruth's roses, the ones she'd planted the summer we moved in, the ones I'd been tending for 2 years since she died. "Moving," I said. Gerald's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, I thought Preston said you were moving soon to be closer to the family. He sounded pretty certain when we talked last week." I discovered in that moment that Preston wasn't just taking my money and my autonomy. He was taking my reputation, my relationships, and my place in the community I'd called home for 36 years, one neighbor at a time. "Oh, we're discussing options?" I said, and I made my voice sound thoughtful rather than shocked. "Nothing's decided yet." "Ah," Gerald said, and I could see him processing that. "Well, if you do move, you'll be missed around here. 36 years is a long time." "Yes," I said, "it is." He went back to his lawn. I finished watering the garden with hands that stayed perfectly steady even though my mind was calculating at engineering speed. Preston had been telling people, not asking, not suggesting, telling them as if it was already decided, already settled. Building a narrative in the neighborhood that Vernon Caldwell was moving away, probably because he was getting too old to manage on his own, probably because his thoughtful son was taking care of him. How many conversations had he had with my neighbors while I watered my garden oblivious? How many people in Granville already believed I was leaving before I'd even been told? I went inside and added it to my notebook. Monday, August 18th. Gerald Fletcher asked when I'm moving. Preston told neighbors I'm relocating before winter. Spoke as if already decided. Then I noticed the brochure. It sat on my kitchen table where it had been for weeks. Glossy paper with photographs of smiling, elderly people in a bright atrium, the kind of images that tried very hard to make institutional living look like a resort. Sunrise Gardens, assisted living. Simone had left it there after a visit I barely remembered mentioned something about just in case for the future. And I'd nodded and set it aside. I picked it up now and looked at it with different eyes. Tuesday afternoon, I called the number on the back. "Sunrise Gardens, this is Linda speaking. How may I help you?" Linda Hayes answered with the practiced cheerfulness of someone who'd spent years convincing families that assisted living was a choice, not a surrender. "I'm calling to ask if there's a reservation under my name," I said. "Vernon Caldwell." "Oh yes, Mr. Caldwell." Her voice brightened immediately. "Your son Preston booked a lovely room for you 5 weeks ago. Studio with a garden view, very popular. He was very specific about wanting something available by late fall. 5 weeks ago, I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall. Today was August 19th. 5 weeks ago was mid-July. Before the pharmacy. Before my card was frozen. Before I knew anything was wrong. 5 weeks ago," I repeated. Are you certain? Absolutely. July 14th. He put down a deposit to hold the room. Said you were eager to be closer to family, but wanted to wait until after summer to make the transition. Such a thoughtful son. July 14th. I'd been at Margot's birthday party that weekend. I'd signed that card Simone took to add a sticker. I'd had no idea my son was simultaneously booking a room to move me out of my house. And this reservation, I said carefully, is it confirmed or just tentative? Oh, it's confirmed, Mr. Caldwell. Preston was very clear. He said you'd been discussing it for months and just needed to finalize the timing. Months. 5 weeks ago, Ruth's roses were still blooming. I was still buying my own medication without asking permission. And my son was already booking a room to put me in like I was furniture that needed storage. Thank you, I said. I just wanted to verify. Of course. We're so looking forward to having you with us. You're going to love it here. We have weekly social events, beautiful grounds, excellent medical staff, on call 24 hours. It's really like a community. I'm sure it is, I said and hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding that glossy brochure with the smiling elderly faces on the cover, and I understood something I'd been too naive to see before. This wasn't about protection. It wasn't about concern or making my life easier or helping me age safely. This was about making me disappear. Move me to an assisted living facility 40 minutes from Granville. Isolate me from my neighbors, my community, my independence. Control my money, my medical decisions, my daily life. And do it all while telling everyone it was for my own good, that I'd agreed that this was what I wanted. By the time anyone thought to ask me directly, I'd already be gone. And who would believe a confused old man in a nursing home over his devoted son who'd taken such good care of him? I opened my notebook and wrote Tuesday, August 19th. Nursing home reservation confirmed. Booked July 4th, 5 weeks ago, before pharmacy incident. Deposit paid. Preston told facility I'd been discussing this for months. I was never told. Then I wrote, this is not about helping me. This is about erasing me. I walked into the living room and looked at the family photograph on the shelf. Preston, at 9 years old, standing beside me with a proud smile after we'd built his first wooden toolbox together. His hands had been so small, then barely able to grip the hammer I'd bought him. I'd taught him to measure twice, cut once, to plan carefully before acting. Where did that boy go? Wednesday morning, I drove to the law office of Philip Thornton, a man I'd known for 40 years, who'd written Ruth's and my wills 15 years ago, who I hoped still remembered what loyalty meant. Philip Thornton's law office looked exactly as it had 15 years ago when he'd written those wills. Same oak desk, same file cabinets, same diplomas on the wall. Philip himself, 68, now looked over his reading glasses the same way he had 40 years ago in our college engineering lab before I built bridges, and he built cases that protected people from their own families. Vernon, he said, standing to shake my hand. It's been too long. Yeah, I said, it has. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat, and then I told him everything. The pharmacy, the frozen card, the bank account changes, address, phone, email, transaction codes, the forged signature from Margot's birthday card. The nursing home reservation booked 5 weeks before I knew anything was wrong. The neighbors who thought I was moving because Preston had told them so. Philip listened without interrupting. 40 years of friendship meant he knew me well enough to recognize the difference between a man asking for advice and a man who just discovered his own son was systematically erasing him from his own life. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked one question. Before we discuss strategy, do they have a valid power of attorney over your finances or health care? No, I said. Nothing. I never signed anything like that. Philip's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He pulled a legal pad toward him and wrote something down. Then every change they made to your accounts is illegal, he said quietly. Not questionable, not ethically gray. Illegal in the strictest legal sense. The question isn't whether you can fight this, Vernon. It's how we prove intent. I felt something settle in my chest. Validation, legal standing, a foundation to build on. What do I do? I asked. Don't confront them yet, Philip said. People expose themselves most when they think they've already won. Keep documenting, keep acting normal, and let me start pulling the legal framework we'll need when this goes public. At how long? Give me 2 weeks to build the case properly. Can you maintain the performance that long? I thought about Sunday's phone call with Preston. The way I'd thanked him for taking care of everything. Yes, I said, I can. Philip and I had studied engineering together 40 years ago, back when we believed the world operated on logic and mathematics. He'd gone into law. I'd gone into bridges. But we'd both learned the same lesson: the strongest structures are built on solid foundations, and right now Philip was showing me mine. That weekend, Preston called to ask if he and Simone could bring Margot over for lunch on Saturday. I said yes. They arrived with Italian takeout from the place Ruth and I used to order from Penny and marinara breadsticks, Caesar salad. We sat in my living room, food spread across the coffee table. Margot settled on the floor with her tablet, coloring something with her finger while the adults talked. Except talked wasn't the right word. Simone spoke. Preston nodded. Dad, Simone said, and I'd stopped correcting her years ago. Have you been remembering your medication? It's so important at your age. I've been taking the same pills for 12 years, Simone, I said. I think I remember. Of course, she said smoothly. I just worry. Preston worries too. Don't you, honey? Preston nodded. We just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And your doctor's appointments, Simone continued. When's your next physical? We should make sure it's on the calendar. I can call and schedule it if you'd like. Sometimes these things slip through the cracks when you're managing them alone. I watched her carefully. The way she leaned forward slightly when she spoke. The way she used we and our when talking about my medical care. The way Preston sat back, letting her drive the conversation, only contributing when she prompted him. To anyone watching, to a neighbor, to a doctor, to a judge, Simone would appear to be the controlling force. Preston would look like he was just following his wife's lead, agreeing because she was insistent and he wanted to keep the peace. I have a checkup in 2 weeks, I said. Already scheduled. Perfect, Simone said. You'll let us know how it goes. Of course. Margot looked up from her tablet. Grandpa, can I have more breadsticks? Help yourself, sweetheart, I said. She reached for the basket, and Simone's hand shot out to stop her. Just one more, Margot. We don't want it to spoil dinner. It is dinner, Margot said quietly. You know what I mean. Preston said nothing, just nodded when Simone glanced at him for support. Was Preston really this passive, just nodding along while his wife orchestrated everything? Or was I watching the exact performance they wanted me to see? I thought about Philip's words. People expose themselves when they think they've won. They stayed for an hour. Simone asked about my grocery shopping, my utility bills, whether I'd had any trouble with the house. Preston barely spoke 10 words. Margot colored on her tablet and ate one breadstick very slowly. When they left, Simone hugged me at the door. We're here for you, Dad. Whatever you need. I know, I said. Thank you both. Preston shook my hand, looked me in the eye. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. I watched them walk to their car. Watched Margot climb into the back seat, still holding her tablet. Watched them drive away. Then I went back inside and started cleaning up the takeout containers. That's when I found it. Margot's tablet tucked under a throw pillow on the sofa. She must have set it down when they were leaving, forgotten it in the rush to get to the car. I picked it up, intending to call Preston right away. But something Philip had said stayed with me. People expose themselves when they think no one's watching. I set the tablet on the coffee table and decided to wait. Margot left her tablet on the sofa, tucked under a throw pillow. I'd call Preston tomorrow to let him know she'd forgotten it. Tomorrow. Monday morning, I had my routine checkup with Dr. Rachel Brennan, the same doctor who'd monitored my blood pressure for 12 years and knew I'd never missed a pill in my life. They'd taken my money, my mail, and my neighbor's trust, but stealing my medical records and turning them into evidence of the very incompetence they were manufacturing crossed a line I hadn't known existed until Dr. Brennan showed me the note I'd never made. She opened my electronic file on her computer the way she always did, scanned the recent entries, then paused. "There's a note here from last week," she said, reading from the screen. "Says you're experiencing repetitive forgetfulness per family report. Did you add this through the patient portal?" I stared at her. "I've never used the patient portal. I don't even know how to log in." Dr. Brennan turned the monitor toward me. There it was, dated 6 days ago, patient showing signs of repetitive forgetfulness per family report. Recommend cognitive screening at next annual physical. "I didn't write that," I said. "Then someone else did," Dr. Brennan said quietly. "Someone who has your patient portal password. Mr. Caldwell, this is concerning. She'd been my doctor for 12 years. Long enough to know the difference between a man who forgot his medication and a man whose medical records were being altered by someone else." "Can you remove it?" I asked. "I can delete the note and log it as unauthorized access," she said. "But I need to ask, is someone trying to build a case that you're incompetent? Because this is exactly the kind of documentation someone would use to justify taking over your medical decisions." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what they're doing. For 12 years, Dr. Brennan had trusted me to manage my own health. One fabricated note in a computer system, and suddenly that trust had a question mark beside it. How many other professionals were reading files about me that I'd never seen?" She deleted the note. Added her own unauthorized access to patient portal detected. Note claiming forgetfulness was not authored by patient and does not reflect clinical observation. Patient demonstrates full cognitive capacity and excellent medication compliance. "Thank you," I said. Vernon." She said, using my first name for the first time in 12 years. "Whoever is doing this knows what they're doing. They're building a paper trail across multiple systems, financial, medical, probably social too. You need a lawyer." "I have one," I said. "Good." She printed a copy of her note for my records. "Keep this, and change every password you have. All of them." I drove home and added it to my notebook. Monday, September 1st. Medical records compromised. Note added to patient file claiming cognitive impairment. Dr. Brennan deleted it and documented unauthorized access. Saturday afternoon, Margot stopped by with Simone to drop off something Preston had forgotten at the house. She was wearing her soccer uniform, grass stains on the knees. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, and hugged me the way 11-year-olds do when they're still young enough to mean it. "Hi, sweetheart. Come in for a minute." She followed me inside and sat beside me on the sofa for a moment, the way she used to when she was smaller and wanted to tell me about school. "Grandpa," she said, "do you forget things a lot?" It's autism." I looked at her. At her honest face, her mother's eyes, her innocence. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "Mom said I should tell people you forget stuff sometimes. She said it helps you get better care. She said grown-ups need to know so they can help you." The world narrowed to that moment. To my 11-year-old granddaughter sitting beside me repeating words her mother had taught her, not understanding she was being used as a weapon. What kind of mother teaches her daughter to lie about her grandfather, not for the child's protection, but to build a case for putting him away. Did Mom tell you to say that to specific people? I asked gently. She said if anyone asks how you're doing, I should mention it. Like teachers or your neighbors or doctors. She said it's important. Teachers, neighbors, doctors. Simone had turned my granddaughter into a courier for a lie, sending her into my community to spread the narrative that I was declining, that I needed help, that I couldn't be trusted to manage my own life. Margot, I said carefully, I don't forget things more than anyone else. Sometimes I forget where I put my keys, just like your mom forgets where she put her phone. That's normal. But I take my medication every day. I remember all my appointments, and I remember everything you tell me about school and soccer. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. So I shouldn't tell people you forget. You should tell people the truth, I said, which is that your grandpa is doing just fine. She smiled. Okay, Grandpa. I hugged her, felt her small arms around my neck. 11 years old. The same age Preston had been when I'd taught him to build that wooden toolbox. The same age when children still believed adults were telling them the truth. You're the sweetest girl I know, I said. Don't ever change that. I won't, she said. I walked her to the door, watched her run to Simone's car parked at the curb. Simone waved from the driver's seat. I waved back, watched them drive away. Then I went inside and sat alone in my living room. I opened my notebook to a blank page. Wrote the date, September 6th, 2023. Then I wrote her name, Margot. I couldn't write anything else for several minutes. They'd taken my money and my mail and my medical records. They told my neighbors I was moving, booked me a room in a nursing home, forged my signature on legal documents. But teaching my granddaughter to lie about me, that was the moment I stopped documenting evidence and started planning something else entirely. Because if they were willing to use an 11-year-old child as part of their campaign, I needed to know exactly how far they'd already gone and what other systems they'd already corrupted. After Margot left, I sat with my notebook open to a blank page. I wrote the date, September 6th, 2023. Then I wrote her name, Margot. I couldn't write anything else for several minutes. After Margot left, I sat with her name written in my notebook and decided something. I was done just documenting what they'd taken. I needed to know what they were hiding. Monday morning, Tanya called asking me to come to the bank immediately. They'd discovered something in the security audit that explained why I'd never seen certain warning signs coming. The home security cameras Preston installed 18 months ago to keep me safe had been keeping someone safe, just not me. And 3 weeks ago, someone erased every second of footage those cameras had ever recorded. I drove to the bank. Tanya had papers spread across her desk when I arrived. Your home security system is linked to this account for automatic payments, she said. The audit flagged something unusual. What did they find? She turned her computer screen toward me. On August 28th, someone logged into your camera system and deleted all archived footage. 30 days of recordings gone. Not a malfunction. A deliberate wipe. August 28th. 2 weeks after the pharmacy incident. 5 days after I'd started documenting everything in my notebook. The cameras are motion activated, Tanya continued. They record when someone enters the house, goes through rooms, accesses files. We've requested detailed access logs from the security company to see who performed the deletion and what was recorded before it was erased. I thought about Preston installing those cameras. How he'd explained they'd keep me safe if someone broke in. How he'd set up the system himself, created the account, given me a password I'd never used because I didn't know how. How many times had Preston stood in my living room explaining how the cameras would keep me safe while already planning the day he'd need to erase what they'd recorded. When will the access logs be ready? I asked. 2 to 3 weeks. The security company has to pull them from their backup servers. But Vernon, she paused. Whoever deleted this footage knew what they were doing. They logged in with your credentials, performed the deletion, then logged out. If we hadn't been running this audit, you'd never have known. Thank you, I said, for everything. Just doing my job, she said. But Vernon, be careful. People don't destroy evidence unless they're worried about what it proves. Wednesday afternoon, I drove 40 minutes to Columbus to meet with Dr. Helen Whitmore. Philip had suggested it 2 days earlier over the phone. Get a formal cognitive evaluation, he'd said. Scientific proof of mental competency before Preston can claim otherwise. If they try to file for conservatorship, we need documentation that their claims of incompetence are fabricated. Dr. Helen Whitmore had spent 25 years administering cognitive tests to elderly patients, and she could tell within the first 3 questions whether someone was being evaluated for their own protection or someone else's benefit. She was younger than I expected, maybe 55, gray hair, pulled back, calm demeanor that reminded me of Ruth when she was explaining something complicated to someone who was worried. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and simple tasks, she said. There's no pass or fail, just answer naturally. She asked me what day it was, what year, who the president was. Asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. Asked me to remember 3 words and repeat them back 5 minutes later. Asked me to draw a clock showing 10 past 11. I'd spent 40 years solving problems that existed in steel and concrete where mathematics didn't lie, and structures either held or they didn't. Turns out the same principle applied to cognitive tests. Numbers don't care about your son's narrative when your brain works exactly the way it's supposed to. 20 minutes later, she set down her clipboard. Mr. Caldwell, she said, you scored 28 out of 30. That's exceptional cognitive function for any age, but particularly for 70. So I'm not losing my mind. Not even close. She wrote something in her report. You have completely normal cognitive function with no signs of dementia, memory impairment, or diminished capacity. In my professional opinion, you are fully capable of managing your own affairs, making your own decisions, and living independently. I'll document that formally. She printed 2 copies, handed one to me. Keep this somewhere safe. And Mr. Caldwell, if someone is claiming you're incompetent when you're clearly not, there's usually a reason that has nothing to do with your well-being. I'm beginning to understand that, I said. I sat in my car outside the clinic, holding that test result. 28 out of 30. No cognitive impairment. Scientific documentation that every claim Preston and Simone had made about my forgetfulness was a fabrication. And then I remembered something Philip had said a week earlier when I'd asked why they were doing this. Control, I'd said. Close, Philip had replied. But not quite. People don't take this much risk for control, Vernon. They take it for survival. When someone builds a campaign this elaborate, they're not planning ahead, they're running from something. The question is what? I drove home with the test results folded in my jacket pocket, scientific proof that my mind was sharper than my son wanted anyone to believe. What I didn't know yet was that the real reason Preston needed me declared incompetent had nothing to do with protection. It had everything to do with $600,000 in debt I wouldn't discover for another 2 weeks. But I was beginning to understand that this wasn't about an aging father who needed help. This was about a desperate son who needed something I had. The only question was what and how far he'd already gone to get it. For 3 weeks, I'd been gathering evidence documenting their campaign building a case. But I still didn't know what Preston was running from. Thursday night, he brought the answer to my door, wrapped in another carefully staged performance. They came for dinner on a Thursday night in early September, and I watched them perform a scene so carefully choreographed, I could almost admire the precision if it hadn't been designed to make me look insane. I'd made spaghetti Preston's favorite since he was a child, the recipe Ruth used to make. We ate at the kitchen table talking about ordinary things. Margot's soccer team, the weather, how the maple trees were starting to turn early this year. At exactly 7:15, Simone glanced at the clock on the microwave. "Denny," she said, "don't forget your blood pressure medication." "Thank you," I said. I got up, opened the cabinet, took out the pill bottle, filled a glass of water, and swallowed the small white tablet in front of both of them. Set the bottle back in the cabinet. Returned to the table. I took my blood pressure medication at exactly 7:15 while Simone watched, and 30 minutes later, when Preston asked if I'd remembered my pills, I understood I was watching two people gaslight me in real time, and that I needed to let them think it was working. We finished dinner, moved to the living room. Preston asked about my checkup with Dr. Brennan, how my blood pressure was doing. Normal conversation. Concerned son asking about his father's health. Then, at 7:45, Preston looked at me with that expression I'd seen 100 times before, gentle concern mixed with patience. "Dad, did you remember to take your pills tonight?" "You forget sometimes." I opened my mouth to say yes. "I took them at 7:15, you both saw me." But Simone spoke first. "He hasn't taken them yet," she said, her voice careful and concerned. I was just about to remind him. "This happens more often lately." I stared at her. Then at Preston. They both looked back at me with identical expressions of worried patience. I took them at 7:15, I said quietly. "Right after dinner. You asked me to." "Simone, I took them in front of you." Simone's face shifted to something that looked like compassion. "Dad, you're thinking of last night. Tonight you haven't taken them yet. It's okay, that's why we're here. To help you remember." I'd known Preston for 41 years, every day of his life, from the moment he was born. And that Thursday night in my kitchen was the first time I truly understood my own son had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look me in the eye and lie about something I'd done 10 minutes earlier. "The bottle's in the cabinet," I said. "Right where I put it back after taking the pill at 7:15. Preston stood, opened the cabinet, pulled out the bottle. Shook it slightly. "See, Dad's still full for tonight. Why don't you take one now, and we'll set up a reminder system so you don't have to worry about remembering." I could have argued, could have insisted, could have shown them the cabinet where I'd returned the bottle after taking the pill, the glass I'd washed and put in the dish rack. But Philip's words echoed in my mind. People expose themselves when they think they've won. So I took another pill, thanked them for looking out for me, acted confused about whether I'd really taken the first one or just imagined it. After they left, I wrote every detail in my notebook. Thursday, September 12th. Medication gaslighting. Took BP pill at 7:15 p.m. in front of Simone. At 7:45 p.m., both claimed I hadn't taken it yet. Coordinated performance. Took second pill to avoid confrontation. Both pills documented. 3 days later, I called Preston. I sat in my backyard, where Ruth's garden was starting to fade into autumn, and I performed the finest acting of my 70 years. I took Preston. I said, and I made my voice sound weaker than usual, slower, more hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot the past few weeks. Maybe you were right about everything. Maybe I do need more help managing things." Silence on the other end. I could hear him processing, deciding whether this was real. "Dad," he said carefully, "are you serious? You're ready to talk about this? I'm tired of fighting, son. I think I'm trying to accept it. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Thursday night with the medication, I really thought I'd taken it. But you and Simone both said I hadn't, and I let my voice trail off. I just want things to be easier. Ruth used to watch me work on bridge designs late into the night and ask how I knew which piece to place first. I'd tell her the same thing every time: you build the foundation last after you've planned everything else. Because once people see the foundation, they know what you're building. Preston couldn't see my foundation yet. Preston exhaled audibly. Relief. Pure, unmistakable relief. Dad, I'm so glad you're ready to talk about this. Simone and I have been so worried. We just want to help. We want to make things easier for you. I know, I said. I know you do. Let's have dinner this week, Preston said. Just us. We can talk about what help would look like. No pressure, just options. Okay, I said. That sounds good. I love you, Dad. Love you too, son. After I hung up, I sat in my backyard and smiled for the first time in 5 weeks. Ruth used to tell me the strongest bridge is the one nobody knows is being built. I was building. Monday morning, Philip called. His voice had that careful tone people use when they've discovered something they wish they hadn't. "Now, can you come to my office now?" Philip's desk looked like a crime scene, financial documents spread across every surface, each one a piece of the puzzle I'd been too trusting to see. The number Philip circled in red at the bottom of Preston's business records wasn't just debt. It was $600,000 in obligations coming due December 31st, and my $1,800,000 house was the only asset standing between my son and complete financial collapse. "So I spent the weekend pulling public records," Philip said, organizing the documents into 3 stacks. "Bankruptcy filings, creditor notices, court documents. Your son's renovation business is drowning Vernon, and you're the only thing keeping him above water." He slid the first stack toward me. "One Superior Construction Supply. $187,000 unpaid since April. They've filed a lien." Second stack. "To Midwest Lumber Company. $124,000 in collections. They're threatening legal action." Third stack. "City Industrial Equipment Rentals. $69,000. They've already filed a lawsuit. Court date in November." I stared at the numbers. $380,000. "To subcontractors alone," Philip said. "That's not counting the bank." He pulled out another document. Official letterhead from First Commerce Bank. Commercial credit line extension. $220,000. Application denied last month due to excessive existing debt and insufficient collateral. I did the math in my head the way I'd calculated structural loads for 40 years. $600,000 total. Due December 31st, Philip said. Every single notice has the same deadline. After that, the lawsuits start. The business collapses. Preston files for bankruptcy, loses everything. I'd spent 40 years managing construction budgets, in the millions approving payments to subcontractors, understanding what happens when a business can't pay its debts. I knew exactly what $600,000 in unpaid obligations meant. I knew exactly how desperate that made someone. "He needed money," I said. "Why didn't he just ask me for help?" Philip's expression shifted. "Because your pension is $3,800 a month. Your savings account has $127,000. Even if you gave him everything you have in liquid assets, it wouldn't be enough. He'd still be short by nearly $500,000. Then what?" Philip slid one more document across the desk. This one I recognized immediately. A mortgage pre-approval application. "To your house," Philip said quietly. "Valued at $1.8 million, no existing mortgage. Owned free and clear for 36 years. I looked at the application. Preston's name, his business information, and under collateral property, my address. "He can't mortgage my house without my signature," I said. "No, Hayamo," Philip agreed. "He can't. But Vernon, what if you thought you were signing something else? What if the documents he brought you were labeled medical power of attorney, or living will update, or estate planning amendment?" The room went very quiet. "He wouldn't sell your house," Philip continued. "That would be too obvious. That would require your clear, conscious consent and a title transfer everyone would see. But a mortgage, that's just paperwork. You sign documents, they get filed with the county recorder's office, and suddenly your house has a $600,000 lien against it. The money goes to Preston's business account. His debts get paid, and you wouldn't even know until the first mortgage payment came due, or until you tried to sell the house yourself and discovered it wasn't free and clear anymore. When does a son stop seeing his father as a person and start seeing him as $1,800,000 in equity he can access if he just pushes hard enough? Then all the incompetence claims, I said slowly, the forged signatures, the medical records, the neighbors, the nursing home reservation, it was all building a case, Philip finished. Establishing a pattern of cognitive decline that would make it believable if you signed documents you didn't understand. If you later claimed you never agreed to mortgage your house, Preston could point to months of evidence that you forget things, that you need help managing decisions, that you agreed to things, and then forgot you'd agreed. I thought about Margot coach to tell people her grandfather forgets things. About Simone insisting I hadn't taken medication I'd taken right in front of her. About Preston's voice on Sunday relieved when he thought I'd finally surrendered. They weren't planning to wait until I was actually incompetent. They were manufacturing incompetence so they could act while I was still fully capable of stopping them, as long as nobody believed me when I said no. The nursing home, I said. That was never about care. It was about isolation, Philip said. Get you into assisted living 40 minutes away from Granville, away from your neighbors, your doctor, your bank manager, everyone who knows you're completely competent. Surround you with staff who only know what Preston tells them, that you're forgetful, that you need help, that he has your best interests at heart. Then bring you documents to sign, medical updates, facility agreements. Except buried in those pages is a mortgage application, a power of attorney transfer, whatever they need. I sat there looking at $600,000 in debt spread across Philip's desk. Can you stop it? I asked. Philip looked at me across those documents, across 40 years of friendship, and said the words that turned everything into a race against time. Only if we act before they do. Tuesday morning, Philip called again. Conrad Spencer was ready to present his findings. We needed to seek them immediately. Conrad Spencer sat at the end of the First Trust Bank conference table with his laptop, and a silence that said he'd found something nobody wanted to see, but everybody needed to know. Digital footprints don't lie the way people do. Every keystroke leaves a timestamp. Every login leaves an address. And when Conrad Spencer opened his laptop and showed me who had erased 30 days of security footage from my own home, the pattern stopped being about Preston and started being about someone I'd underestimated from the very beginning. Conrad spoke less than anyone in the room, but when the 55-year-old digital forensics investigator opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me, his silence said more than most people's explanations ever could. July 22nd, he said, pulling up a log file. 2:37 p.m. Someone logged into your home security system remotely and deleted all archived footage. 30 days gone. Tanya leaned forward. The IP address registered to your son's laptop, Conrad said, highlighting a line of code. But I cross-referenced with his work schedule. He pulled up another document. Construction site logs signed by Preston's crew foreman. At 2:37 p.m. on July 22nd, your son was at a job site in Newark, 40 minutes from your house. Confirmed by 3 witnesses. He was there from noon until 6 p.m. Then who? I started. Conrad turned his laptop screen toward me again. Cell phone tower pings show your daughter-in-law's phone was at your address from 2 p.m. to 3:15 p.m. that afternoon. She was the only person in your house. She used your son's laptop to access the system. Engineers know that every structure leaves evidence of how it was built. Weld marks, bolt patterns, stress points. Digital systems are the same. Simone thought deleting the footage erased the evidence. She forgot the system remembered who asked it to forget. She knew what she was doing, Tanya said quietly. 15 years in corporate IT, I said. She knew exactly what she was doing. Conrad closed his laptop. I've documented everything. IP logs, cell tower data, worksite confirmations. It's all here. Before I tell you what happened next. Are you still with me? Comment A. If you think Simone was acting on, or B. If you think she and Preston planned this together, and add one reason why. A quick note, what follows includes some recreated details for narrative purposes, but the pattern of elder financial abuse I'm describing is very real. 2 weeks later, mid-October, my phone rang at 7:30 in the evening. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Caldwell. A woman's voice, soft, almost whispering. Yes. My name is Karen. I work at Sunrise Gardens. I can't stay silent about this anymore. Karen Whitfield had worked in elder care facilities for 20 years, long enough to recognize the difference between families seeking the best care for their loved ones and families seeking the most isolated room where nobody would ask questions. What do you need to tell me? I asked. She took a breath. I could hear her moving like she was walking somewhere private. Your daughter-in-law contacted us last month. She wanted to confirm details about your room reservation. But then she asked about our visitor policy. What did she ask? She requested that once you're admitted, we restrict visitor access. Said you get agitated easily when too many people visit. Said outside contact might cause confusion, and we should limit it for your well-being. I sat down slowly. She specified who shouldn't be allowed. I asked. Anyone not immediate family. She said neighbors and friends might upset your routine. That she and your son would handle all your social contact to keep things stable. Karen Whitfield had risked her job to make this call whispering from some back office or parking lot, where nobody could hear her warn a stranger that his family was planning to lock him away from the world. Some people still believed courage meant something. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because I've seen this pattern before, Mr. Caldwell. They isolate you first. Then they make decisions you never agreed to. Then, when you object, they point to the isolation as proof you're confused. And by the time anyone realizes what's happening, she stopped. And you're what? I asked. You're gone, she said. Not physically. But you disappear from everyone who knew you were fine. And nobody believes you when you say you never agreed to any of it. How many times have you seen this? Enough times that I can't stay quiet anymore. I could lose my job for this call. But I thought someone should warn you. I thank you, I said. Thank you for calling. Is there anything I can do to help you? She asked, her voice still barely above a whisper. You already helped, I said. You called. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my living room phone still in my hand. Digital proof of who deleted the evidence. A nursing home employee willing to risk her job to warn me. Philip building a legal case. The MMSE test proving my competence. Tanya documenting every unauthorized transaction. Conrad's forensic timeline. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building something strong enough to hold the weight of what came next. What came next was 4 weeks of the most careful construction I'd ever attempted. Not in steel or concrete, but in patience evidence and the kind of strategic silence that makes desperate people reveal exactly how far they're willing to go. October became a study in patience, 4 weeks of assembling fragments that alone meant nothing, but together formed a picture so clear even a desperate man couldn't explain it away. Building a legal case is like building a bridge. You don't assemble it in order from beginning to end. You build each supporting piece separately, and then in one careful sequence, you lock them all together until the structure can bear weight that would crush any single component standing alone. Philip's office became our workshop. The conference table disappeared under documents. Timeline first. Philip said, laying out bank records chronologically. December 15th, 2022, online banking credentials reset. January 9th, Preston added as secondary contact. February 9th, all transaction alerts rerouted to Preston's phone. Tanya added the next layer. April 9th, daily spending limit lowered to $500. August 28th, all contact information changed. Every penny still in the account, but you couldn't access it without Preston's approval. Conrad placed his forensic report on top. July 22nd, 2:37 p.m. security footage deleted from Simone's IP address while Preston was at a job site. Digital proof of coordination. I added the cognitive test. September 18th, mini mental state examination 28 out of 30. Dr. Whitmore's report, no signs of dementia, memory impairment, or diminished capacity. Philip set down the forged authorization form. March 17th, signature transferred from Margot's birthday card. Simone took the card to add a sticker. Each piece alone could be explained. The password reset, helping an elderly father with technology. The spending limit, protecting against fraud. The nursing home reservation, planning ahead for inevitable decline, but assembled together in one blue binder, dated and cross-referenced and witnessed. They told a different story. A story of systematic exploitation that began 8 months before I ever noticed, executed by two people who knew exactly what they were doing and why. Ruth used to watch me sketch bridge designs and ask why I drew the supports before the roadway. Because, I'd tell her, you build the foundation that nobody sees before you build the part everyone uses. This case was the same months of invisible work, so that when the moment came, everything would hold. When do we use this? I asked Philip. When they try to execute, he said. When they bring you papers to sign, when they think they've won. Late October afternoon, I was sitting in my living room when I saw Preston's car pull up outside. He'd stopped by without calling unusual lately. I watched through the window as he got out, checked his phone, started walking toward my door. Then my neighbor Gerald Fletcher came out to water his lawn, saw Preston, waved. I couldn't hear the conversation from inside, but I watched it unfold. Gerald saying something, Preston responding. Gerald gesturing toward my house, then asking something else. Preston's expression shifted. Confusion, then realization, then something that looked like barely controlled panic. Gerald went back to his watering. Preston stood on the sidewalk for 5 seconds, then turned and walked back to his car. Got in. Immediately made a phone call. I could see him talking, gesturing, his face tight. That evening, Preston called me. Dad, we need to meet this weekend. We need to talk about your future, soon. It's important. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Urgency. Something close to fear. I've been thinking about that too, son, I said. Sunday, Preston pressed. Can we do Sunday? Let me check my calendar, I said, even though I knew it was empty. I'll call you back. I found out later what Gerald had asked. Simple neighbor curiosity. What paperwork is your dad working on? I've seen him going to the bank quite a bit lately. One innocent question. And Preston knew. 2 days later, I made my move. I called Preston before he could call me again. Took control of the conversation, the way I'd taken control of every other part of this. Preston, I said, and I made my voice sound weary, slower than usual. I've been thinking about what you said, about signing papers, about making things easier. Silence on the other end, waiting. I'm ready, I continued. I want to sign whatever you need. Let's have dinner next Sunday. You and Simone. Bring the documents. The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. Dad, Preston said, and his voice flooded with relief so pure I almost felt guilty. Are you serious? You're really ready to do this? When does a trap stop being a trap and start being justice? When the person walking into it chose every step of the path themselves. I'm tired of this, son, I said. I just want it finished. Okay, Preston said quickly, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. Okay, Sunday. 6 o'clock I'll bring everything. Simone and I will bring everything we need. 6 o'clock, I confirmed. I'll make dinner. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for trusting us. See you Sunday, son. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, pulled out a piece of paper, and wrote carefully. Sunday dinner guest list, 6:00 p.m. Philip Thornton, Tanya Harrington, Conrad Spencer. I paused, pen hovering over the paper. Then I added the final line in careful block letters, Preston and Simone Caldwell. The list was complete. I folded it and placed it in the blue evidence binder Philip had prepared. 4 names who knew the truth. 2 names who thought they'd won. 1 Sunday dinner. 6 days away. Everything I'd learned over 40 years as an engineer came down to this. The strongest structures are tested not by everyday weight, but by the exact load they were designed to withstand. Sunday dinner would test whether I'd built something strong enough to hold the truth. 6 days until Sunday dinner. I spent Thursday morning cleaning the house, preparing for guests I'd never invited to dinner before. Witnesses instead of friends, evidence instead of conversation. Thursday afternoon, 3 days before Sunday dinner, I was cleaning the living room when I found Margot's tablet wedged between the sofa cushions, the same tablet she'd left behind 7 weeks ago, that I'd meant to return a dozen times but kept forgetting. The perfect piece of evidence is the one your enemy gives you by accident. And Margot's forgotten tablet, left running with a voice recording app she used for school projects, had been sitting under my sofa cushion for 7 weeks, capturing nothing but silence, until the one dinner conversation that would prove everything I'd spent 2 months trying to document. I pulled it out, pressed the power button. The screen lit up immediately, battery somehow still holding a charge. The voice recording app was open, showing a file dated September 14th. The night of that family dinner when Simone had dominated the conversation and Preston had barely spoken. Margot used this app to record herself practicing lines for school plays. She'd probably left it running by accident. I pressed play, expecting to hear an 11-year-old girl rehearsing dialogue. Instead, I heard Preston's voice. Dad needs to sign before the end of November. The bank needs the collateral documents filed by December 31st, or we lose everything. I stopped breathing. Simone's voice quieter. What if he refuses to sign? The recording continued. Background noise, dishes clinking in the kitchen. That was me cleaning up after dinner while they talked in the living room. Margot must have been at the table coloring her tablet, sitting beside her recording. Well, he won't refuse, Preston's voice said. He called me Sunday, said he's ready, said he's tired of fighting. But if he does, a pause. Then Preston again, his voice dropping lower. Then we use the old signature. Simone, did you keep the birthday card? The one Dad signed for Margot in March. Yes, it's in the file. Good. That signature will work perfectly if he won't sign voluntarily. I stood in my living room, holding my granddaughter's tablet, listening to my son plan to forge my signature if I didn't cooperate. The recording kept going. Their voices, my dishes in the sink. Margot humming softly while she colored. Margot had left this tablet here practicing her lines for a school play about families and trust, and in her innocent 11-year-old way, she'd accidentally recorded the real play happening in my living room. The one where her father cast himself as the hero, saving his confused elderly dad, when really he was the one writing the script to take everything I'd built. I called Philip. Can you come over now? What happened? I found something. Philip arrived in 20 minutes. I had the tablet ready at the kitchen table, the recording cued to the beginning. We sat across from each other, the way we'd sat across drafting tables 40 years ago, when we were both still figuring out what kind of men we'd become. And we listened. Preston's voice filled my kitchen. We need $600,000. The subcontractors are threatening lawsuits. The bank denied the credit extension. Dad's house is the only option left. He'll never agree to mortgage it, Simone said. He doesn't have to agree. He just has to sign the papers. What papers? Living trust amendment, medical power of attorney update, standard estate planning documents. He'll see his name, Philip Thornton's letterhead legal language he's seen before. He won't read every page. Nobody does. How many times over the past 2 months had I looked at that tablet sitting on my coffee table and thought I should return it tomorrow? How many times had tomorrow become next week? What if I'd returned it in September, never knowing what it held? And if someone checks, Simone's voice asked. By the time anyone checks, the money's already paid out to the creditors. The house has a lien. Dad's in assisted living where we control his visitor access. Who's going to believe a confused old man in a nursing home over his son who's been managing his affairs for months? The recording played for another 3 minutes. Preston methodical. Simone asking questions. Preston answering each one with the precision of someone who'd thought through every detail, every contingency, every way this could go wrong, and how he'd prevent it. Then Margot's voice clear and innocent. I'm done coloring. Can I watch TV? Sure, sweetheart, Simone said. The recording ended. Philip and I sat in silence. 7 weeks, I said finally. This has been sitting in my living room for 7 weeks. Philip rewound it, listened again to the critical section. Preston's command. Did you keep the birthday card? Simone's confirmation. Preston's approval. Vernon. Philip said quietly. This changes everything. This proves Preston directed the forgery. He's not just complicit, he's the architect. All the time, Simone seemed to be in control, dominating conversations, handling the technical details. Was exactly what they wanted me to see. I finished. Make Simone look like the mastermind. Preston plays the passive husband, just going along with his pushy wife. If it ever came to light, he could claim he didn't know. That she manipulated both of us. But this recording, proves he commanded it. Proves he planned it. Proves the whole performance was designed to protect him. Philip set the tablet down carefully on my kitchen table and looked at me across 40 years of friendship with an expression that was equal parts lawyer and father figure. Smarnon, he said quietly, this is evidence of federal wire fraud and elder financial exploitation. The FBI could step in tonight. I looked at the tablet. At the blue evidence binder sitting on the counter. At the guest list with Preston's name written in my own hand. Sunday, I said. We wait until Sunday. Friday passed in careful preparation. I set the table, made sure the dining room was ready. Called Philip, Tanya, and Conrad with the final details. 5:30 arrival. Dinner at 6. Preston didn't know they were coming. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. Preston's name on the screen 2 days early. Dad, about tomorrow, something came up. Can we postpone? His voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying not to sound nervous. Postpone, I said. Everyone's already invited. Can't cancel now. Silence. 3 seconds that felt like 30. What everyone, Dad? I have guests coming, friends. You'll recognize some of them. But I thought we were going to talk. About the papers. About your future. We will, I said. Tomorrow at 6. Like we planned. Dad, I really think we should... See you tomorrow, son, 6 o'clock. I hung up before he could argue. Heard the click echo in my empty kitchen. Preston knew something was wrong, but backing out now would look more suspicious than showing up. He was trapped by his own performance of the dutiful son. Sunday arrived cold and clear. November in Ohio, the kind of day where autumn finally admits it's becoming winter. I set the dining room table the way Ruth used to for holiday dinners. Good plates, cloth, napkins, candles that had been in storage since she died. Philip arrived at 5:30. Then Tanya. then Conrad. I seated them carefully. Philip at the head of the table opposite me, Tanya to my right, Conrad to my left. The blue evidence binder sat on the sideboard behind me. At 6:02, Preston's car pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as he and Simone got out. She carried a store-bought apple pie. He carried a leather folder, the papers he thought I was finally ready to sign. They walked to the door together, and I saw the exact moment Preston glanced through the dining room window and recognized Tanya. His step faltered, just for a second. Then he kept walking. I opened the door before they could knock. "Dad," Preston said, and his smile was perfect. "We brought pie." "Come in," I said. They stepped inside. Simone saw the dining room first, the set table, the candles, the three people already seated. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Preston saw them next. Recognized Tanya from the bank. Recognized Conrad from, I wasn't sure from where, but his face showed he knew exactly who the digital forensics investigator was. "Dad," Preston said carefully, "you didn't mention other guests." "Wanted it to be a surprise," I said. "Please sit." The apple pie store-bought cinnamon-scented sat on my mother's crystal plate, like every Sunday before this one. Simone set it on the sideboard. Preston placed his leather folder on the table in front of the two empty chairs. "We brought the papers you asked for," Preston said. "Everything you need to sign." "I know," I said. "Thank you, son. But first I have some things I need to show you." I opened the blue binder. The first document was a timeline. 8 months laid out on 2 pages. Every unauthorized account, change, every forged signature, every system that had been compromised. Dates, times, IP addresses. December 15th, 2022, I said quietly. Online banking credentials reset without my knowledge. January 9th, 2023, secondary contacts added to my account. February 9th, all transaction verification codes rerouted to Preston's phone. I spoke without anger. Just facts. Just dates. Engineering precision applied to the dismantling of my son's careful construction. Tanya leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, addressing Preston directly, "on August 28th, every piece of contact information on your father's bank account was changed to your address, your phone number, your wife's email. No power of attorney was on file. No authorization existed. Those changes were illegal." Preston opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me. "Dad, I was helping you. You were getting confused." I placed the next document on the table, my cognitive test. "September 18th, I said. Mini mental state examination, 28 out of 30. Dr. Helen Whitmore's assessment, completely normal cognitive function, with no signs of dementia, memory impairment, or diminished capacity." Simone's hands were flat on the table, perfectly still. Philip's pen, the Mont Blanc I'd given him 30 years ago when he made partner, tapped twice against his notepad. His signal. Everything was documented. Everything was witnessed. Conrad opened his laptop. "July 22nd, he said, turning the screen toward Preston and Simone. 2:37, someone logged into your father's home security system and deleted all archived footage. The IP address traced to your home network, Mrs. Caldwell. Cell phone tower data confirms you were at your father-in-law's house at that exact time. Your husband was at a construction site in Newark, confirmed by 3 witnesses." Simone's face stayed composed. Years of corporate IT meetings had taught her how to maintain control when systems failed. "But I had one more thing." I placed Margot's tablet on the table. "September 14th, I said. The night you came for dinner." Margot left her tablet on the sofa. She uses the voice recording app to practice lines for school plays. She left it running by accident. I pressed play. Margot's voice filled the dining room. young, innocent, curious. Grandpa, why am I telling people you forget things? Preston's voice, clear, unmistakable. Because it's true, sweetheart. Because it helps him. When people know Grandpa has trouble remembering, they can take better care of him. I let it play. Let Preston hear his own voice teaching his 11-year-old daughter to lie about her grandfather's mental capacity. Let him hear himself discussing the birthday card signature. Let him hear the timeline, the desperation, the plan. When the recording ended, I stopped it, looked at my son across the table I'd set for Sunday dinner. Simone looked at Preston. Preston looked at the table. For the first time in 10 weeks, nobody said a word. The silence lasted 37 seconds. I counted. Simone broke first. This was his idea. Her voice cut through the stillness like a knife through butter. I only helped because he's my husband. Preston planned everything, the accounts, the forgery, all of it. I told him it was wrong, but he said you wouldn't even notice that you were getting confused anyway. Preston's head snapped toward her. Simone, don't. She stood backing away from the table. I'm not going down for this. I have a daughter to think about. You told me your father was losing it, that we were just protecting family assets, that... Philip reached for the tablet. There's a second file, he said quietly, scrolling through the app. Same date, September 14th. It looks like the recording app saved 2 separate files that evening. Margot must have stopped and restarted it without realizing. He pressed play. A second recording filled the room. Different angle of sound, same kitchen. The timestamp read September 14th, 2023, 6:48 p.m. earlier than the first file. Preston's voice. We need that birthday card, the one he signed last year. Simone off camera. Why you? The signature. Its perfect full name, steady hand, before any of this confusion started. We can use it as a reference. Match the pressure points, the letter formation. Preston, that's... It's insurance. Keep it somewhere safe, not the house. Your office, maybe. Somewhere he'd never look. A pause. Then Simone's voice, quieter. The real estate papers, among other things. Simone, we're $500,000 in the hole. The Meridian development is bleeding us dry. If we don't move now, we lose everything, the company, the house, Margot's school. Everything. Philip stopped the playback. Simone's face had gone white. She sank back into her chair, hands trembling. I looked at my son. 42 years old, $600,000 in debt, and he couldn't meet my eyes. What do you say to the child you raised when you discover he stopped seeing you as his father and started seeing you as a problem with a solution? Tanya's hand found Conrad's across the table. Philip closed the tablet cover with a soft click. Preston stood. He didn't run, didn't make excuses. He walked around the table until he stood directly in front of my chair, and for the first time all evening he looked at me. I'm sorry, Dad. 2 words. 40 years of fatherhood, and it came down to 2 words. I don't have an excuse. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. I could tell you about the debt, about the business, about how I thought I was running out of time. But none of that matters, does it? Because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my father. I started seeing you as a problem to solve. The air went out of the room. I told myself I was protecting the family, that I was being practical, strategic. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. I turned you into a business decision, into an asset to be managed, and I don't know when that happened. I don't know when I became the kind of man who could do that. Simone was crying quietly. Conrad had his arm around Tanya's shoulders. Preston knelt, actually knelt right there on the dining room floor. I can't undo it. I can't give you back the money or the months of worry or the nights you spent wondering if you were losing your mind. But I need you to know I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I became. I'd imagined this moment 100 times. In every version, I'd had something devastating to say. Something that would cut through all his rationalizations and make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt. But watching my son on his knees, watching the last of his pretenses crumble, I found I had nothing, or maybe I had everything. I stood. Preston rose with me, his face streaked with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "Philip," I said. The lawyer reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. He slid it across the table, not to Preston, but to the empty space between us. "You brought mortgage papers tonight," I said. "Documents that would have signed away my home, your mother's garden, 40 years of memories turned into collateral for your mistakes." Preston's hands were flat on the table, fingers spread, like he was bracing for impact. Like he was trying to hold himself together through sheer force of will, and the table was the only solid thing left in a world that had tilted sideways. "I have papers too," I continued. "Different papers. Philip and I have been very busy." Simone looked up. "What kind of papers?" "The kind that protect me. The kind that make sure this never happens again. The kind that address restitution, accountability, and consequences." I paused. "The kind that also offer a path forward, if you're willing to take it." Preston stared at the folder like it might explode. "But first," I said, "we're going to have dinner. All of us. We're going to sit at this table, the same table where you planned to manipulate me into homelessness, and we're going to eat the pot roast that's been in the oven for 3 hours. We're going to be civil. We're going to remember that we're family, even when family does unforgivable things." I pulled out my chair and sat. "And then when we're done, when the dishes are cleared and the coffee is poured, Philip is going to open that folder. You're going to read every word. You're going to understand exactly what you're signing and why. And you're going to make a choice, a real choice, not a manipulation or a scheme." I reached for the pot roast, beginning to serve. "Let's have dinner," I said. "The lawyer has papers for us to sign, not your papers. Mine." We ate pot roast in near silence. Silverware scraped plates. Someone passed the salt. Tanya complimented the carrots. We performed the ritual of a family dinner while the manila folder sat on the sideboard like a loaded gun. I cut the apple pie while Philip opened the folder, 6 pages notarized, dated 3 days ago. Vernon asked me to prepare a comprehensive estate restructure. Philip began sliding the first page to the center of the table. "Given recent circumstances, immediate action was warranted." Preston set down his fork. Simone's hands disappeared beneath the table. "The house goes into an irrevocable living trust, effective immediately. Vernon retains full lifetime use and occupancy. However, any sale or mortgage now requires either Vernon's written consent before 2 witnesses or written certification from 2 independent physicians, neither of whom can be family members, attesting that he lacks capacity to make financial decisions." The words landed like stones in still water. 2 doctors, Preston repeated quietly. "Shaw, correct. And they must be selected from a pre-approved panel maintained by the County Medical Association. No emergency appointments. No walk-in evaluations. The trust document specifies the criteria for cognitive assessment." I watched my son's face. He understood. The loophole he'd planned to exploit: one friendly doctor, a signature on letterhead, and suddenly Dad's incompetent, had been sealed shut. That additionally, Philip said all financial accounts have been transferred to a new structure. Vernon's checking and savings remain in his sole name, but I've been appointed as independent fiduciary for any transaction exceeding $5,000. "You're taking away his autonomy," Simone said. "No." Philip's voice stayed level. "I'm protecting his self-determination. There's a difference. Vernon can spend his money however he wishes. Donate it, invest it, buy a boat. But no one else can access it. No joint accounts. No powers of attorney that bypass the oversight structure. Tanya poured coffee. The smell of dark roast cut through the cinnamon and butter from the pie. Preston looked at me directly for the second time that night. "Are you leaving anything to me?" The question hung there naked, afraid. "I haven't finished yet," I said. Philip turned to page 3. The pie sat untouched on 6 plates, cinnamon cooling crust, crumbling at the edges where my knife had pressed too hard. "There's a separate trust fund," I said, taking over from Philip. "For Margot and any future grandchildren." Simone's head snapped up. "The funds are substantial enough for college graduate school, a first home. But the management structure is specific." I paused. "Philip serves as trustee until Margot turns 25. At that point, she gains full control." "We're her parents," Simone started. "You are. And you'll raise her, guide her, love her, I hope. But you will have zero management rights over these funds. No withdrawals, no loans against the principal, no investment decisions." Preston's jaw tightened. "You're cutting us out. I'm protecting her from inheriting your mistakes." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften them. "Margot is 8 years old. She had no part in this. She shouldn't pay the price. The trust includes provisions for education and basic needs," Philip added. "School tuition, medical expenses, enrichment programs, all approved through the trustee structure. But luxury purchases, early disbursements, anything beyond the defined parameters requires unanimous approval from a 3-member board. Myself, Tanya, and 1 additional member, Margot, can select when she turns 18. Tanya's hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. This was the first she was hearing about her role. "Why Tanya?" Preston asked. "Yeah, because she's family, but she's not you. Because she has her own career, her own moral compass that doesn't bend when the bank account runs dry." I met Tanya's eyes across the table. "If you're willing." She nodded slowly. "I'm willing." Margot was 11 years old and would wait 17 years to access her grandfather's legacy. 17 years to grow up, finish school, become whoever she was going to be, without family debt hanging over her head like a sword. I wondered if she'd forgive me for caring more about her future than her parents' feelings. "The remainder of the estate," Philip said, flipping to page 5, "is designated for charitable distribution upon Vernon's death. Organizations focused on elder advocacy, financial literacy, and protective services. The specific charities are listed in Appendix B, so there it was. The house locked in trust. The money managed by an independent fiduciary. Margot's inheritance protected until she was old enough to defend it. And everything else, 40 years of work savings, careful planning, going to help people like me who'd found themselves alone and vulnerable. Preston didn't inherit the business I'd built. Didn't get the retirement account I'd funded. Didn't receive the blessing he'd been counting on to dig himself out of debt. I don't want children paying for parents' mistakes," I said quietly. "But from today, no one takes my self-determination again. Not you. Not anyone." The silence stretched. Conrad shifted in his seat. Then he stood. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, looking at Preston, not me. "We need to talk about the forged signatures and the wire transfers. Not tonight. Soon." Preston's face went pale, but he nodded. "I understand. I'll be in touch Monday morning. 9 a.m., my office." Conrad's voice was gentle but absolute. "Bring legal representation if you want it." "Simone too?" Preston asked. "Simone too." Conrad gathered his coat from the back of his chair. The criminal investigation was coming, and this time my son knew he couldn't outrun it. Conrad's meeting happened Monday morning. I wasn't there, didn't need to be. The wheels of justice moved forward with or without my presence. 1 week later, Philip slid the federal filing across his desk. United States versus Preston Caldwell, 18 U.S.C. Section 1344. "The FBI opened a formal case," Philip said. "Federal bank fraud. Signature forgery on FDIC-insured accounts triggers federal jurisdiction. I looked at the document. My son's name in block letters at the top. Case number. District Court seal. The machinery of the law reducing 42 years of life to a criminal docket. What are we looking at? I asked. It was up to 30 years per count, plus fines up to $1 million. Philip's voice stayed neutral, professional. The U.S. Attorney's Office is still determining how many counts to charge. Minimum 3, the initial transfer, the mortgage application, and the fraudulent power of attorney. 30 years. Preston would be 72 when he got out. Older than I was now. They've retained separate counsel, Philip continued. Preston hired Marcus Delaney, former federal prosecutor, now in private practice, specializes in white-collar defense. Simone retained Julia Brennan, different firm entirely. I looked up. Separate lawyers. Yes. Brennan's already signaling she wants to negotiate independently. My read is she's positioning Simone as the less culpable party, the wife who followed her husband's lead. Which is a lie. Which may be legally effective. Philip pulled the document back, closing the folder. Federal prosecutors offer deals to defendants who cooperate. If Simone Flips first testifies against Preston, she could walk with probation and restitution. I sat back in the leather chair. Through Philip's window, I could see Main Street, the hardware store where I'd bought paint for the nursery. When Preston was born, the diner where I'd taken him for breakfast every Saturday before Little League practice. What do they want from me? I asked. Statement of facts. Timeline. Documentation of the financial harm. You're the victim here. Your cooperation strengthens the case. And if I don't cooperate, Philip met my eyes. The investigation proceeds anyway. The evidence is solid: bank records, forged documents, IP logs, the recordings from Margot's tablet. Your testimony makes it airtight, but it's not essential for conviction. Separate lawyers meant they weren't protecting each other anymore. The partnership that had stolen from me, that had plotted in my kitchen and practiced my signature, had fractured under the weight of consequences. Each of them was facing this alone. I thought about Simone's face at the dinner table when the second recording played. The calculation in her eyes when she tried to betray Preston. And Preston's face when he knelt, broken, genuine, too late. I'll provide whatever the prosecutors need, I said. But I'm not attending hearings, not sitting in courtrooms watching my son in handcuffs. Let me know what they decide. Philip nodded. I'll coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I drove home through December, cold, bare trees lining streets I'd known for 40 years. The investigation was real now. Federal. The kind of case that made the local paper, that neighbors whispered about at the grocery store. My son, the businessman, the community leader, the father, was facing prison, and I'd helped put him there. 2 weeks later, Saturday morning, my phone rang. Preston's voice was different, quieter. The sharp edges worn down to something softer, more careful. I wanted to ask permission to drop by this weekend. No papers, no agenda, just to see you. I held the phone against my ear, watching frost melt on the kitchen window. Steam rose from my coffee cup. Permission. Not announcing he was coming. Not assuming access. Asking. All right, I said. This Saturday afternoon. Thank you. A pause. I thank you. The back fence had been sagging since September, boards loose where we'd built it together 20 years ago. Preston was 14, then all elbows and attitude, complaining about the work until we got into a rhythm. Me holding the posts steady while he drove the nails home. I looked out the window at the fence line. The wood was graying, now weathered. 3 boards hung at angles, nails pulled free by winter frost. Preston, I said. Yes. Bring your tools. Silence on the line. Sir, the back fence needs fixing. Another pause. Longer. I could hear him breathing, careful, measured, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I'll bring them, he said finally. What time? 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I hung up and stood at the window, coffee cooling in my hand. The fence had survived 2 decades of weather, snow, rain, the weight of climbing roses my wife had planted the summer before she died. It had held strong through storms that tore shingles off roofs and knocked down power lines, but time and neglect had weakened it, and now it needed repair. Not replacement, not tearing down and starting fresh, just careful work board by board fixing what had broken. I didn't know if my son and I could do the same. Didn't know if 20 years of trust could be rebuilt after months of lies. But the fence needed fixing regardless, and maybe that was enough to start with. Maybe working side by side, hands on wood and steel, we could find words that had failed us across dinner tables and legal documents. Or maybe we'd work in silence the way we had when he was 14 and everything felt simpler. Either way, he was coming Saturday. He'd asked permission, he'd said thank you, and I'd said yes. Saturday came and went. Preston arrived at 2 o'clock with his toolbox, and we fixed the fence without saying much. Some things don't need words. 4 months passed. Wednesday morning, 9:47 a.m., 4 months after my card was declined, I walked into Granville Family Pharmacy again. Same fluorescent lights humming overhead. Same smell of antiseptic and cardboard. Same pharmacist behind the counter, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when the door chimed. Blood pressure refill, Mr. Caldwell. Yes, thank you. She turned to the shelves behind her, pulled the white bag with my name printed on the label, scanned the barcode. The register beeped. 1873. I handed her my pension debit card. She swiped it through the reader. One beep, clean, approved. The receipt printer whirred. She tore off the slip and placed it in the bag with the medication. Have a good Wednesday, sir. You too. I walked out into December sunshine, the pharmacy bag light in my hand. The whole transaction took 90 seconds. No drama, no declined card, no humiliation in front of strangers while I counted quarters and dimes from my pocket. Just a man buying his medicine. I sat in my car for a minute. Engine running, heat blowing through the vents. The receipt was visible through the white paper bag, proof of purchase, proof of autonomy, proof that the account in my name still belonged to me. 4 months ago, I'd stood at that same counter with $17 cash and no way to prove who I was. My son had emptied my accounts, forged my signature, and planned to take my house. I'd felt myself disappearing, not from dementia or confusion, but from deliberate erasure by someone who was supposed to protect me. I pulled out of the pharmacy lot and drove through Granville. The town looked different in winter. Bare trees lined Main Street. Holiday decorations still hung from lampposts even though Christmas was past. The hardware store had a sale sign in the window. I passed Meadowbrook Gardens, the assisted living facility, with the white fence and rocking chairs on the porch. A woman in a purple cardigan sat outside, despite the cold coffee cup steaming in her hands. She waved at someone pulling into the parking lot. It looked like a nice place. Clean, well-maintained. Ruth would have liked the flower beds along the walkway, even dormant in December. Maybe someday I'd live somewhere like that. Maybe my knees would give out, or my heart would weaken, or I'd wake up one morning and decide I didn't want to maintain a house anymore. But it would be my choice. That's what they didn't understand. Preston, Simone, all the people who see gray hair and assume incompetence. Growing old doesn't mean surrendering dignity. Needing help doesn't mean losing your voice. The nursing home fence was white and perfect. Ruth would have liked it. But no one gets to choose my gate except me. I drove past the bank where Preston had forged the withdrawal slips. Past the title company where he'd attempted the mortgage fraud. Past Philip's law office where the estate documents were filed and notarized. Preston fixed the fence last Saturday. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He showed up at 2 o'clock like he'd promised, tools in hand, and we worked side by side for 3 hours. Measuring boards, driving nails, testing posts for stability. When we finished, he'd packed up his tools and stood there in my backyard, hands in his pockets, looking at the fence like he wanted to say something important. But he just said, "See you next month, Dad," and left. Next month. Like it was settled. Like we were building something new on top of what had broken. I didn't know if our relationship would survive what he'd done. Didn't know if trust could be rebuilt after that kind of betrayal. But he was trying. Actually trying. Asking permission instead of assuming access. Showing up when he said he would. Respecting boundaries he'd trampled for months. He was 42 years old, facing federal charges, and finally learning what I'd taught him at 7: ask permission, respect boundaries, earn trust, back one small action at a time. Margot's trust fund was locked in until she turned 25. Philip managed the finances. Tanya agreed to serve on the oversight board. The house couldn't be sold or mortgaged without my written consent or certification from 2 independent physicians who met specific criteria. Every protection was in place, every loophole sealed, every vulnerability addressed. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself, that I could fight back, that I could build a case, gather evidence, set a trap, and execute a plan that protected everything I'd built over 70 years. That being old didn't make me helpless, and being kind didn't make me weak. Love isn't standing behind someone and pushing them toward what you think is best. It's standing beside them and respecting their answer, even when you disagree, even when it's hard, even when you're certain you know better. Preston had loved me the wrong way, had decided my comfort and safety mattered more than my choices, had convinced himself that taking my autonomy was an act of protection rather than violence. He was wrong, and now he knew it. I pulled into my driveway. The house stood solid, white siding, black shutters, the maple tree in the front yard that Ruth and I had planted the summer we moved in. 40 years of memories contained in wood and brick and glass, worth $1.8 million. Still mine. The fence stood straight along the property line boards, aligned posts secure. Preston's work was good, careful. He'd learned that from me: measure twice, cut once, do it right the first time. Maybe he'd learn the rest eventually. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, I'd done what I could. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet car pharmacy bag on the passenger seat. The receipt showed the transaction clear: $18.73, paid with my card from my account for my medication. Simple, ordinary, profound. I am Vernon Caldwell. I am 70 years old, and I still pay for my own medicine. And to you, listening to my story, remember, this age is not permission for others to take control of your life. For months, I ignored the signs, because I didn't want to believe my own son could do this. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overreacting. Don't make my mistake. If something feels wrong, if the people closest to you are suddenly too interested in your finances, your property, your signature trust, your instincts, document everything. Speak up early. This isn't just another one of those dad's revenge stories where anger wins. This is about family justice, the kind that protects everyone, including the ones who hurt you. Real family justice means standing up for yourself while leaving room for healing. I believe God put me through this trial to teach me that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Dignity isn't something you lose with age, it's something you fight for every single day. And sometimes the hardest battle is against the people you raised. If my story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-protection? This isn't like other dads' revenge stories where it's just about getting even, it's about reclaiming dignity. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about family justice and standing up for what's right, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized to protect privacy and emphasize the lesson. What remains true is the message you are never too old to reclaim your voice.